The banquet hall of the Galactic Empire shimmered with excessive grace. Crystal chandeliers floating midair, music woven from plasma vibrations, and tables that adjusted themselves to the exact posture of their guests. Every corner radiated the arrogance of civilizations that believed themselves beyond flaw. When the human envoy arrived, the room fell silent for precisely 3 seconds, as though the universe itself had hiccuped. Ambassador Marilyn Dawes was not what the Empire expected from Earth. She was heavy-set mid-40s, dressed in a deep navy suit that hugged neither ambition nor apology. Her hair, streaked with silver, was tied neatly behind her head. She carried no weapon, no entourage, only a ceramic mug steaming with coffee. The guard scanned it twice, unsure whether it was symbolic or dangerous. In truth, it was both. As she approached the long crystalline table, dozens of alien eyes followed her, slitted, faceted, glowing, calculating. The host of the evening, Viceroy Tizikal of the Avian Tizikor dynasty, stood tall and gleaming in plumage of violet gold. "Ambassador Dawes of Terra," he crooned, his translator smoothing the tone to silk. "We had anticipated your physical arrival with great curiosity." Marilyn smiled mildly. "I do like to make an impression." The Viceroy's beak clicked. "Indeed, humanity continues to surprise us. Your species adapts well, though aesthetically it remains unconventional." There were polite chuckles, some subtle, some cruel. Marilyn did not blush nor bristle. She stirred her coffee once and said, "We call a charm. Works better than camouflage." Her translator paused mid-process, unsure whether to classify the phrase as humor or insult. The Viceroy's feathers rippled slightly. How quaint. Dinner was served, a theatrical display of levitating dishes glowing with bioluminescent color. Marilyn's plate contained an unrecognizable cube that smelled faintly of iron and ozone. She poked it once with a fork. "We usually start with bread," she murmured. "We start," said the Viceroy, "with what nourishes superiority." "I prefer carbohydrates," she replied. The smaller delegates, the crystalline, the scaled, the floating intellects made of vapor, exchanged confused glances. A few suppressed laughter. Others studied her as though she were an exotic pet speaking in riddles. Marilyn simply kept eating, the picture of composure. The grand historian, a gelatinous being that pulsed in amber hues, addressed her. "Tell us, human, why does your species cling to such crude customs? Eating, drinking, sleeping? You could be so much more efficient if you abandoned biology." She dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Efficiency is overrated. We like to be reminded that we're alive." The historian's translator buzzed, unable to find a direct equivalent for alive. The delegates muttered among themselves. The Viceroy smirked, sensing entertainment. "Tell us then, Ambassador, what has Earth achieved lately, besides gravity?" Marilyn took a sip of her coffee, savoring it. "We built a space elevator using chewing gum and bad decisions. It works." The laughter came hard this time, full-bodied, mocking. One delegate wheezed. Another dropped a utensil. The hall echoed with elegant cruelty. Marilyn waited for it to end. "You see," she said when the laughter quieted, "humor keeps our species from extinction. It's cheaper than therapy and better for morale." The Viceroy tilted his head, feathers glinting like polished knives. "And yet here you sit, alone, in the presence of true power. Does that not prove our superiority?" "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it just proves you needed entertainment tonight." The smile never left her face. The Viceroy's didn't either, but his feathers stiffened. "Careful, Ambassador. Wit without worth is insolence." "Then it's a good thing humanity has both." The room chilled slightly, the air thick with restrained offense. Somewhere behind her, a guard's talons clicked against the floor, waiting for an excuse. Marilyn's expression remained serene. She looked less like a threatened diplomat, and more like a teacher watching her students fail a test they'd written themselves. The historian spoke again, its voice like liquid metal. "Your planet's request for continued trade routes has not been approved. The Empire finds your species unpredictable, too emotional, too undisciplined." Marilyn's tone softened, almost gentle. We've been called worse, usually by our own. A ripple of uncertain laughter rose and died. The viceroy leaned forward. Perhaps, then, you understand why the Empire doubts Earth's maturity. Your people expand recklessly. Your colonies disobey containment treaties, and your scientists tamper with forces they don't comprehend. What could a primitive world like yours possibly offer the stars? She met his gaze evenly. Experience. Experience. In surviving arrogance. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. The delegates shifted in their seats. Somewhere in the background, a soft whir of servos filled the pause. Marilyn took another sip of coffee. The steam fogged her glasses slightly. She didn't wipe it away. "Tell me something, Viceroy," she said at last. "Do you know what happens when something fragile looks down on something patient?" He frowned. "A riddle." "No," she said. "A warning." The Viceroy stood abruptly, feathers bristling. "You are out of line, human." "Probably," she said. But, in fairness, the line keeps moving. Her calm unnerved them more than defiance would have. They couldn't tell if she was bluffing or simply beyond fear. The Grand Historian whispered, "Perhaps we should adjourn before diplomacy devolves into drama." Marilyn nodded politely. "Excellent idea. I find digestion works best in peace." She rose, collected her mug, and adjusted her coat. Before leaving, she turned back toward the table, her tone lighter, almost kind. "By the way, your chefs are remarkable. The seasoning reminded me of home." The Viceroy sneered. "Primitive Earth food?" She smiled. "No, gunpowder." The delegates froze. Her smile remained placid, her tone airy. "Just a metaphor, of course. We humans love metaphors." She walked out before anyone could decide whether to laugh or panic. The doors sealed behind her with a whisper. In her absence, the room felt heavier, as though gravity itself had shifted closer to her orbit. For a long time, no one spoke. Then the Viceroy exhaled, his feathers settling. "Barbaric woman," he muttered. The Grand Historian's glow dimmed. Barbaric or prophetic? Outside in the corridor, Marilyn's reflection followed her through mirrored panels of gold. Her wristband flickered once, just enough to suggest communication, though none could hear it. She paused by a viewing window, gazing at the Imperial fleet suspended beyond the stars, flawless and proud. She lifted her mug slightly, as if in a toast. "To patience," she murmured. "The sharpest weapon we've got." Then she walked on, leaving behind the faint aroma of coffee and something else the aliens couldn't name. Anticipation. The next morning, the Empire's council chamber shimmered with a cold, artificial dawn. Light bent through crystalline walls, casting reflections that made even the most confident delegates appear fractured. The air was dense with tension disguised as protocol. Ambassador Marilyn Dawes entered last, coffee cup in hand, as always. Her footsteps were soft, but every sound seemed amplified in the uneasy quiet. The Viceroy waited on the raised dais, feathers immaculate, tone brittle. "Ambassador Dawes of Terra," he announced, voice echoing across the marble expanse. "Yesterday's performance at the banquet was memorable. Today we shall address substance." Marilyn smiled faintly and took her seat. "Good morning, Viceroy. I assure you, I prefer substance over spectacle. Coffee helps." She raised her mug in mock salute. A few of the younger delegates snickered until the Viceroy's glare silenced them. "We will discuss Earth's continued defiance of imperial border regulations," he said. "Your colonies have trespassed beyond sanctioned sectors." "Exploration, not trespass," she corrected gently. "We're curious by nature." "Curiosity," hissed one avian officer, "is the first step toward rebellion." Marilyn tilted her head. "Strange. For us, it's usually the first step toward invention." The translation units clicked as her sarcasm fought for meaning. The chamber's atmosphere shifted, half amusement, half discomfort. Marilyn sipped her coffee calmly, eyes flicking to the delegates. Their posture told her everything. Disdain, fear, intrigue. They had underestimated her once. She wouldn't allow them a second chance. The Grand Historian's voice rolled through the hall, like syrup over metal. Ambassador, do you speak for your people or simply for your appetite? Marilyn met its golden eyes without flinching. Both, actually. One keeps me alive. The other keeps me polite. A soft laugh broke somewhere near the rear benches, quickly stifled. The historian rippled in offense. Politeness, Ambassador, is not a weapon. Depends who's holding it. The Viceroy slammed his clawed hand against the console. Enough wordplay. Humanity stands accused of arrogance, resource theft, and noncompliance with the Empire's directives. We expect an apology. Marilyn leaned back in her chair, utterly composed. Of course. We're very good at apologies. We've been practicing since the Bronze Age. The Viceroy blinked. You mock this council? Never, she said smoothly. I just have a talent for perspective. It helps in rooms full of feathers. The chamber bristled. The insult was veiled, elegant, impossible to punish without losing face. The Viceroy's feathers stiffened. Perhaps your species mistakes insolence for courage. Marilyn gave a small shrug. Sometimes they look the same. We tend to find out only after the smoke clears. Her calm tone made the moment more dangerous. She wasn't angry. She was comfortable. That unsettled them more than open defiance ever could. The historian interjected again, trying to reclaim control. Ambassador Dawes, perhaps you misunderstand your position. Earth's admission to this council was an act of mercy. You represent a species still divided by war and excess. Marilyn smiled faintly. Divided, yes. But you'll notice we stopped killing each other long enough to reach the stars. You can call that excess if it helps you sleep. A low murmur swept the room. The delegates were used to groveling, not wit delivered with surgical grace. She wasn't a soldier, but she carried herself like one, unarmed, yet unafraid. The Viceroy exhaled sharply. You tread dangerously close to insolence, human. Marilyn looked up, eyes unreadable. And you tread dangerously close to honesty. It suits you. The moment fractured. The avian nobles hissed. Guards tensed. Someone muttered that humans lacked restraint, that they were a primitive species wearing borrowed civility. She set her mug down with deliberate gentleness. Borrowed civility? That's an interesting phrase. On Earth, we call it diplomacy. You should try it sometime. It keeps wars from cluttering the calendar. The Viceroy's mandibles clicked in restrained fury. Your insolence will cost you dearly. This council can revoke your planet's protection at any time. Then you'd be declaring war on a species that names its missiles after angels, she said softly. Are you sure that's a good investment? The silence that followed was profound. Even the translation units paused as if unwilling to repeat it. The historian's form dimmed slightly. Such threats are unbecoming of an envoy. Marilyn's tone softened again, almost maternal. It wasn't a threat, just data. The Viceroy struggled to compose himself, talons scraping lightly across the dais. Your arrogance blinds you. You stand alone, surrounded by civilizations older and stronger than yours. She looked around the chamber. Older, certainly. Stronger, we'll see. The Viceroy rose, towering above her. Enough. This hearing is suspended. Security, escort the ambassador to containment for questioning. Marilyn rose calmly, gathering her documents and mug. Containment? Over coffee and conversation? My, what delicate constitutions you have. Guards approached, their weapons gleaming with restraint fields. She smiled at them as if greeting old friends. Careful with those. They tend to spark when nervous. They hesitated, uncertain. Something in her tone, gentle yet absolute, made obedience feel unsafe. The historian whispered to the Viceroy. She should not be underestimated. Marilyn looked toward the main viewport. Outside, through the shimmering dome, the Imperial fleet hung in perfect formation. Beautiful. Predictable. She tilted her mug, watching the steam curl. You have a lovely navy, she murmured. All that symmetry. It must take forever to polish. The Viceroy hissed. What are you implying? Nothing, she said, smiling. Just admiring good engineering. I like knowing what I'll be up against. Her communicator flickered faintly. A simple pulse of light. She didn't glance down. She didn't need to. Somewhere beyond the station, a human signal had reached orbit. Quiet. Invisible. The guards moved closer. She raised her mug in a toast. To cooperation, she said. One of the consoles beeped. A faint tremor rippled through the floor, subtle but unmistakable. The delegates froze. The viceroy's feathers bristled. What was that? Marilyn looked innocent. Perhaps turbulence. Or indigestion. Hard to tell from here. The tremor subsided, leaving behind an electric silence. Someone whispered, "That came from orbit." She finished her coffee and set the empty mug on the table. "Well," she said, "it appears breakfast has arrived." "Explain yourself," shouted the viceroy. "I'd love to," she said, "but I find actions speak louder than minutes." The comm systems crackled with noise, static, then silence, then an automated voice repeating in flawless Terran English. "Attention. Diplomatic perimeter established." The historian's voice trembled. "What have you done?" Marilyn's expression never wavered. "I sent an invitation. Earth believes in punctuality." Outside the dome, small shapes shimmered into view. Human vessels, sleek and angular, positioned like chess pieces around the station. The viceroy's voice dropped to a whisper. "You brought warships?" She smiled faintly. "Diplomatic escorts. Always safer to travel with company." The historian shuddered, voice low. "This will start a war." Marilyn turned to leave, her tone quiet, steady. "Only if someone mistakes conversation for weakness." She paused at the door, looking back one last time. "Don't worry," she said. "We humans never start wars. We just end them politely." Then she was gone, leaving behind the silence of a room that suddenly understood it had never been in control at all. The alarm lights bled crimson through the corridors, painting every surface in flickering panic. The great Imperial Station, once a monument to control, now pulsed like a wounded creature. The air trembled with overlapping commands as officers shouted into dead comms, their voices dissolving into static. Above it all, calm as if attending a morning briefing, walked Ambassador Marilyn Dawes. Her mug of coffee was still half full, steady in her grasp despite the quaking floor beneath her boots. She moved without hurry, her expression unreadable, her calm so unnatural it seemed to bend the chaos around her. 2 guards intercepted her outside the council chamber, weapons drawn and trembling. "Ambassador Dawes," one barked, "you are to remain confined until the viceroy authorizes your release." His claws clicked nervously on the trigger guard. Marilyn sighed as though inconvenienced by bureaucracy. "You're sure about that?" she asked softly. "Containment never looks good in a press release." "Drop the mug," the other ordered. Her eyes flicked toward him, gentle, disarming, almost maternal. "Son," she said, "I drop this, and your power grid drops with it." They hesitated. Her tone wasn't a bluff. It was the steady voice of someone who didn't raise it unless the outcome was certain. When the station's lights dimmed again, they both flinched, looking upward as if the ceiling might collapse. "If it helps," she added kindly, "I really didn't want to be right this early in the morning." She walked past them without resistance, her ID badge blinking in green. Imperial security systems still recognized her as a diplomatic guest. Inside the chamber, the viceroy stood before a fractured holomap of the fleet, his feathers slicked with anxiety. "You've infected our systems," he spat as she entered. "You and your primitive machines." Marilyn set her mug down on the table, steam curling upward like smoke from a slow-burning fuse. "I prefer the word introduced," she said. "It sounds friendlier." "Do you realize what you've done?" the grand historian demanded, its gelatinous body pulsing erratically. "Half the Empire's defense network has gone silent." She adjusted her cuff, eyes on the holographic map. "That's the point of Operation Silent Table," she said simply. "Silence is often the only way to make someone listen." The viceroy's claws scraped against the control console, his fury simmering. "Your ships have violated Imperial space. This is an act of war." "War." She chuckled softly, almost kindly. "If humanity wanted war, you'd know. We'd have started with your moons, not your menus. You mock us even now." "I adapt," she corrected. "Mockery's free." Missiles aren't. The historian's voice quivered. We offered you civilization. You respond with sabotage. Marilyn's gaze softened for a moment, and there was almost pity in it. You offered us condescension wrapped in ceremony. Don't mistake it for civilization. The Viceroy slammed a claw down, activating a direct feed to orbital command. All units prepare to. The order cut off mid-word. His console flickered, then displayed only a looping image, a plate of Terran pancakes, syrup dripping slowly across the screen. Caption calories equals firepower. The bridge fell silent. That's impossible, whispered an officer. No, said Marilyn, sipping her coffee. That's human coding humor. Our AIs like to leave a note before the fun begins. Fun, the Viceroy hissed. The lights dimmed again, replaced by a faint hum that vibrated in the bones. Across the viewport, the Imperial fleet shifted formation, not under Imperial command, but in eerie synchronization with human vessels stationed far beyond visual range. Every alien officer froze. Their ships were moving as if following an unseen conductor. Marilyn watched the display unfold like a chess game. Your network was beautiful, she murmured. Redundant, efficient, symmetrical. Almost poetic. Shame it never accounted for sugar. What? She smiled faintly. The banquet desserts, Viceroy. Those delicate sweets your nobles devoured last night. Each one carried microtransmission nodes. Nanites small enough to pass your scanners, designed to bind to power conduits. And when they met your encryption, well, they learned to sing. You infected our fleet with food? Technically with dessert, she said. Human diplomacy runs on carbohydrates and contingency plans. The historian's glow dimmed to gray. You cannot possibly control the Imperial systems from here. I don't need to, she said quietly. Your fleet's already controlling itself. You designed it to obey the strongest input signal. Right now, that signal is me. The room erupted. Officers shouted into comms, scrambling for overrides. None worked. The map showed the impossible. The Empire's flagship squadrons forming defensive patterns around the Terran fleet. The humans hadn't fired a shot, but they'd rewritten the chain of command with a virus made of sweet code and irony. Marilyn turned toward the viewport. The reflection of distant ships glimmered in her eyes. Do you know what I love about humanity, Viceroy? She asked softly. We don't need to win wars. We just need to change the rules before they start. You'll destroy everything, he shouted. No, she said. I'll restore balance. Empires forget humility until something smaller reminds them where they came from. You speak of morality while you cripple worlds. She met his gaze. Crippling's temporary. Arrogance is generational. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the reprogrammed engines. The Imperial insignia behind the Viceroy flickered, replaced by a single word in Terran script. Listen. Marilyn's voice softened to a whisper. That's all we ever asked. An officer collapsed into his chair, staring at the display. She's taken the fleet offline, but not destroyed it. It's in stasis. The historian turned toward her, voice trembling. Why spare US? Because extinction's boring, she said. And mercy lasts longer in the archives. The Viceroy's feathers shook with restrained rage. You think mercy makes you noble? No, she said. It makes me practical. Empires fall fast. Alliances take work. You've turned the galaxy into a hostage. Hostages imply fear, she said, glancing at her mug. I prefer conversation. She tapped her wristband once. The hum changed pitch. Every ship in orbit powered down its weapons simultaneously. The stars outside blinked, reflections of silent engines cooling into submission. Marilyn looked at the Viceroy one last time. Tell your Emperor humanity accepts your surrender to dialogue. You wanted proof of our worth. Consider this a demonstration, polite, efficient, and educational. You'll regret this, he whispered. She smiled gently. I already do. I was hoping diplomacy wouldn't need dessert. The historian's body pulsed dimly. What happens now? Now. She picked up her mug. We drink our coffee while it's still hot. And when your emperor calls for negotiations, we decide whether to answer. Lisha, the young amphibian aide who had watched the events unfold in silent awe, finally spoke. "You could have annihilated them," he said quietly. "I could have," she replied. "But humanity doesn't end worlds. We let them understand how easily we could." As she turned toward the exit, Lisha called after her. "And if they strike back?" She paused, halfway through the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dying red glow. "Then," she said softly, "we stop being polite." The door slid shut, leaving behind a chamber heavy with fear, silence, and the faint aroma of coffee, the scent of a species that smiled while rearranging empires. The galaxy held its breath. The imperial fleets, once proud, jeweled arcs of power, hung paralyzed in orbit like frozen constellations. Systems that had ruled for millennia sat motionless, their engines dark, their communications hijacked by a single human directive pulsing across every frequency. Sit, listen, learn. Entire civilizations stared at the message in disbelief. It wasn't a threat, nor a demand. It was worse. It was control delivered with courtesy. In the command deck of the Terran flagship, Ambassador Marilyn Dawes stood before the viewport, a faint reflection of stars caught in her glasses. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried the quiet gravity of inevitability. "Transmission range?" "All systems linked," replied Lisha, his gills trembling as he tried to mask awe. "Every imperial world, every relay, every command line, they can hear you." Marilyn nodded once, as though confirming a weather report. "Good. Then let's begin." She placed her mug gently on the console. Coffee rippled under the vibrations of distant thunder, starships powering down in surrender. She spoke not to a single world, but to the galaxy itself. "Citizens of the Empire, this is Ambassador Marilyn Dawes of Terra. I apologize for the inconvenience. I know no one likes being interrupted during business hours, but we needed your attention. You see, humanity has a terrible habit of being polite long past the point of patience. That ends today." Her tone was calm, conversational, almost warm. That made it terrifying. "We came to your table in good faith. We shared our songs, our science, our humor. You mocked our weight, our simplicity, our flesh. You called us animals who play at civilization." She smiled faintly. "And you were right about one thing: we do play. But the thing about games, we like to win them." The Emperor's advisors watched the broadcast from his golden throne room. The Emperor himself, a figure carved from pride and ritual, stood motionless as Marilyn's words filled the chamber like slow poison. "End this," he barked to his technicians. But the screens didn't flicker, and the sound didn't fade. Her signal was everywhere. Even his own crown's neural band pulsed with the rhythm of her voice. "Operation Silent Table was never about destruction," she continued. "It's about demonstration. You rule through fear. We prefer persuasion. You conquer planets with fire. We conquer networks with dinner invitations." She gestured behind her. "You've all tasted it now. The sweetness that binds code tighter than loyalty." Across the stars, imperial ships floated under human control, each linked in perfect formation. They didn't attack. They waited. The silence was more dreadful than any bombardment. Lisha stood beside her, his throat pulsing. "Ambassador, they're terrified." "They should be," she said softly. "Fear's a language the powerful understand." On the Emperor's world, panic spread through the populace. Crowds gathered around holographic displays where the human woman spoke with eerie serenity. She didn't roar. She didn't threaten. She simply explained the new order, as though announcing a weather forecast. "You will stand down your armadas. You will end conscription of lesser species. You will disband colonies maintained through subjugation. In return, humanity will leave your infrastructure intact and your people unharmed. This is not vengeance. This is discipline." The Emperor shouted over her voice, his words useless against the transmission. "She dares lecture the Empire?" "Majesty," one aide whispered, trembling. "Our fleets respond to her voice print. Every ship, even the planetary defense grids." He turned to his generals. "Then kill her." But Marilyn was already expecting that order. Her image turned slightly, as if she could hear him across the stars. "Please don't," she said, smiling. "Assassination attempts tend to void peace treaties. And we really are trying to be civilized here." The Emperor's fury curdled into silence. He had faced rebellions, invasions, cosmic storms, but never a threat so polite it stripped him of dignity. On the Terran flagship, Lisha approached cautiously. "If you disable their fleets completely, their worlds will fall into chaos. Starvation. Revolt." Marilyn turned, her gaze thoughtful. "Then we teach them something else, how to rebuild without fear." She gestured to the technicians. "Activate Phase 2. Restore basic systems. Not weapons, just air and light." Phase 2 engaged, the AI confirmed. Across the galaxy, lights flickered back to life. Engines thrummed, gravity returned, and civilians cheered, until they realized their ships no longer obeyed their own captains. Every command prompt now bore the same phrase: "Respect must be reinstalled." Lisha watched her, stunned. "You could have wiped them out. Instead, you're parenting them." She chuckled softly. "History's full of bullies who mistook survival for superiority. Sometimes they need grounding." The Emperor appeared on the primary comms link, his hologram projected before her. His face was red with fury, his voice breaking under the weight of disbelief. "Human, you presume to dictate terms to an empire older than your son." "Not dictate," Marilyn said evenly. "Negotiate." He snarled. "You have no authority." "I have your fleets," she replied, voice flat. "That's better." The Emperor hesitated, then lowered his tone to something almost human. "You can't rule by fear forever. The galaxy will turn on you." She smiled faintly. "Then we've done our job. Fear will keep them honest for a while. After that, maybe curiosity will." Her composure began to crack, just slightly. Beneath her calm, exhaustion showed. A woman who had carried the weight of her species' dignity through a room full of predators and decided not to flinch. She stepped closer to the hologram. "You wanted to make an example of humanity. Congratulations. You did." The Emperor's voice trembled. "What will you do now?" Marilyn exhaled slowly. "We'll go home. Grow gardens. Watch the stars behave for once." She looked out at the endless expanse beyond the viewport, where thousands of ships glimmered like obedient constellations. "And if you ever think of mocking Earth again," she added gently, "remember, you're only alive because I prefer quiet victories." The hologram flickered, then vanished. Silence fell across the deck. Lisha approached, uncertain whether to speak. "It's over." "For now," she said. "Empires die loudly. Civilization grows in whispers." The AI's voice interrupted softly. "Incoming transmission, Ambassador." Dozens of systems, messages of surrender, requests for cooperation, even gratitude. Marilyn smiled wearily. "Good. Let them talk. Talking's the first step to peace." She turned to Lisha. "And you, send them our cultural archives. Music, art, literature. Especially the comedies." "The comedies?" She lifted her mug again. "Yes. Let them laugh at us. That's how it always begins." The AI dimmed the lights, and the ship's engines shifted to standby. Outside, the human fleet began to withdraw, leaving behind an empire humbled but alive. On the screens, the last remnants of her broadcast replayed on loop across 1,000 worlds. Her voice echoed softly. "Humanity does not seek your destruction, only your attention." Lisha watched her for a long moment. "You realize," he said, "they'll call you the woman who ended an empire." Marilyn smiled, her eyes on the stars. "No, they'll call me the woman who made them listen." She raised her mug one final time, whispering almost to herself. The fat lady sang, and the galaxy stayed for the encore. Outside, the stars burned quietly, and for the first time in living memory, no empire dared to interrupt the silence.